They took my belt, my watch, and my phone at the entrance, like I was the one on trial. The Cook County Criminal Courthouse smelled like wet wool and old coffee, a damp January morning pressed into stone. I fed my things through the X-ray conveyor with a hollow thud and stepped through the metal detector. It beeped anyway. It always does for me, like machines have private jokes. "Arms out," the deputy said, wanding me. The wand buzzed at my shoes. Salt lines crusted the leather from last night's slush. I could hear a radiator banging somewhere down the hall, a ghost hammering pipes. The hallway lights had that tired hospital color that makes everyone look sick. The subpoena in my pocket rasped against my knuckles. People of the state of Illinois, v. Zachary Reed. I'd Googled the name and gotten a trickle of headlines. Armed robbery gone wrong. A clerk in a liquor store on the south side, dead in the back room. A grainy camera still of a man with a hood and a narrow jaw. The detective on the phone said I was a potential witness. He said a lot of cameras see a lot of faces, and mine had been one of the faces in a block radius that night. I told myself I wasn't nervous. I was lying. My mouth tasted like pennies. Courtroom 302 was colder than the hallway and smelled like wood polish and old paper. The benches creaked if you breathed too hard. I found a seat in the second row, palms flat on my thighs. The assistant state's attorney shuffled papers, her bracelets clicking softly like counting beads. A court reporter flexed her fingers above a machine that looked like a toy piano. Then they brought him in. I didn't feel the floor at first. The cuffs flashed at his wrists. He looked up once, scanning the benches with impatience and a practiced distance, and his eyes snagged mine like a fishhook. The room did that movie thing it never actually does. Sound dropped out, everything went muffled, like you've ducked your head underwater mid-conversation. He had my face. Not kind of. Not if you squinted. He had my jaw, the crooked notch in my right eyebrow from a bicycle crash at 12, the slightly unequal nostrils, the same ridiculous cowlick refusing to lay flat. If I'd shaved 2 days ago and slept in a cell, I'd be looking at a mirror that didn't reflect when I moved. The deputy leaned toward him to say something. The chains clinked. The man who had my face took a breath, held it, and let it out slowly, like he'd been rehearsing that release for weeks. When his lips moved, I didn't need to hear the words to know what they were. I could read them the way you read your own handwriting. "That's him," his mouth said. "That's my twin." The radiator banged again. Somewhere behind me, a woman coughed into her scarf. My subpoena rasped against my hand. I had walked into a courtroom as a witness and found my face sitting in chains at the defense table. If the stranger claims to be your twin, what does that make you? And how long until someone decides the two of you are interchangeable? 3 weeks earlier, I turned 33 at a bar in Logan Square with a jukebox that only plays Springsteen when the regulars are drunk enough. My friend Nate slid me a beer that tasted like grapefruit and aluminum and said, "To Miles, master of spreadsheets, breaker of hearts, owner of exactly 2 interesting shirts. I work as a data analyst for the CTA, which sounds dull until you remember the CTA touches everything. My days were built from clean lines, arrivals, departures, lateness clustered like ants around stations, Excel cells stuffed with the city's heartbeat. I like patterns. I like when things line up. I like coffee at 7:10, my 8 o'clock blue line rattling me under the river, the sour newspaper smell that lifts off strangers' coats when the doors whoosh open. I grew up 20 miles west in Oak Park, where blocks line up like a grid drawn by a careful hand, and porches host earnest conversations about schools. My parents, Kathy and Tom Hart, are the sort of people guitars gravitate to at parties. My mom taught 2nd grade. My dad fixed bikes in the garage and called it church. They adopted me when I was 8 weeks old from an agency with the comforting name of Midwest Family Connections. Framed in the hallway at home, a photo of me with cheeks like proof, and my mom's hair lit gold by kitchen light. My adoption was never a secret. It was a story we told like a favorite bedtime book.
Baby Miles, Airplane Mobile, Sleepy Dog, Forever Home. I never went hunting for biological ghosts. That's the respectable script. Everyone expects the curiosity, and I opted out. Not because I was afraid of what I'd find. The internet turns everyone into a detective for a day. But because my life already felt like a full drawer. The label read Heart in my mother's tidy teacher print. I didn't want to peel it off and risk the sticky never being sticky again. If there was a gap in me, it was small and polite. It showed up when I caught my reflection and couldn't place the echoes. It tugged when a doctor asked, "Any family history of?" And I shrugged. I said unknown a lot in forms. The word slowed my hand like gum under a shoe. The first time anyone mistook me for someone else, it was Sticky Summer on 18th Street, and the guy outside the bodega squinted like the sun had offended him. "Hey, Zach," he said, grinning like we had a bit. "You got my 20 from last week?" I laughed because my default setting is affable. "I'm not Zach." He studied me, then shrugged. "My bad. You got a face like a Honda Civic. Everybody's got one." I told Nate the story, and he said, "Classic Civic face," for a month. None of it mattered until the night the liquor store clerk died, and the detective, with a voice like gravel, called me at 11:42 p.m. and asked where I'd been between 9 and 10, and could I come down to 26th in California in the morning. I had been at home making chili that smelled like cumin and onions, half watching a game I didn't care about. I told him that. He told me they had traffic cams and retail cameras and a panoramic God's eye view of a 4-block radius, and my face had been captured twice near the robbery, once on a corner and once reflected in a window I don't remember passing. I've been called a lot of things: civic, harmless, nice. Nobody had said suspect in a sentence with my name yet. At the station the next morning, the coffee stank like a dare. The detective, Gallagher, wore a tie that had given up. He showed me a grainy still on a monitor, a man in a hood, pale sliver of face, the mouth shadowed. Then another angle, a side profile, jawline etched by store light. "He looks like you," he said, not unkindly, which is a meaner way to say it. I said, "It's not, because what else do you say?" "Where were your cameras at 9:15? I couldn't help myself. I asked like a man who looks for patterns and mischief maps. He chewed gum like it offended him. "You know the station at 79th? We pulled turnstile hits. Your Ventra tag didn't ping last night." I said, "My phone did. Location history." He squinted. "Are you a Boy Scout?" I said, "A data analyst, which is a kind of Boy Scout if you squint." He looked at me like he was measuring wood. He said, "We'll be in touch." I went home with a headache that sat behind my right eye and tapped. 2 days later, the subpoena arrived. Thin paper with a mean voice. Appear. Testify. I ironed my one good shirt and tried to remember if courtrooms smell like hospitals because of the paint or because fear has a scent. My parents wanted to come sit on those benches and beam stern support, but I said no. It felt like I was picking teams and didn't want to make the team bigger before kickoff. Nate offered to wait outside with coffee and bad jokes. I said no to him too. I told myself I wanted to be calm. The truth is, I wanted to be alone in case I fell apart. Falling alone feels like less sound. I didn't fall apart. I sat on a bench and watched a man with my face walk into a courtroom in cuffs. And here's the part I can't clean up for you. Relief bloomed in my chest first. I could feel its heat, a guilty little sun. "See," the relief said, "you're not crazy. This is evidence." Then it curdled in the second breath into a fear so clean I could smell it, sharp as a new rubber band. If he had my face, he had my mistakes too. If the world misread him, it could misread me. Mirrors are not innocent. When the deputy turned toward me, eyebrows up, it took me too long to realize she was speaking. "Mr. Hart," she said, "counsel would like to speak with you." I stood. The wooden bench grumbled. I ran my thumb over the stapled edge of the subpoena like it might produce a splinter to root me. If the room had two of me in it, how many versions of my life were about to unspool? The defense attorney's office was a closet with diplomas. The fluorescents buzzed like hornets. He had a tie clip and ink on his thumb, the kind of man who reads motions on the train and eats bagels over briefs. Walter Klein, the plaque said. His suit smelled faintly of somebody else's cigarettes. He gestured me into the chair and closed the door with the tie-clip man's precise click. "You're Miles Hart," he said, unnecessary and soothingly official. "That's me," I said, which felt like a test and a prayer. He slid a manila folder toward me. The folder had a weight that made my stomach react like it was about to be asked to hold more than it could carry. On top of the papers, a photo. My face in county orange, slack with exhaustion, under cheap light that made skin look like wax. "This is your photograph," he said carefully. "This is also my client." I didn't touch the picture. I didn't trust my fingers not to tremble. "What do you want from me?" "To tell me if I'm losing my mind," he said, but he didn't smile. "My client, Zachary Reed, says he's your twin, separated by adoption, born in Mercy in '92. He was surrendered to the state at 5 months. He grew up in and out of homes. He did not have your Oak Park." It hurt like a truth I didn't want. "My parents adopted me when I was a newborn," I said. "They said the agency handled everything. Midwest Family Connections." He nodded, a small, hungry movement. "We found your birth certificate in public records, redacted, of course. We found his. Same date, same hospital. The mother's names are different, but you look like a lazy god photocopied you." "What's your point?" I said. I heard the edge in my own voice and hated it. He tapped the folder. The folder had a weight that made my stomach react like it was about to be asked to hold more than it could carry. On top of the papers, a photo. My face, in county orange, slack with exhaustion, under cheap light that made skin look like wax. "This is your photograph," he said carefully. "This is also my client." I didn't touch the picture. I didn't trust my fingers not to tremble. "What do you want from me?" "To tell me if I'm losing my mind," he said, but he didn't smile. "My client, Zachary Reed, says he's your twin, separated by adoption, born in Mercy in '92. He was surrendered to the state at 5 months. He grew up in and out of homes. He did not have your Oak Park." It hurt like a truth I didn't want. "My parents adopted me when I was a newborn," I said. "They said the agency handled everything. Midwest Family Connections." He nodded, a small, hungry movement. "We found your birth certificate in public records, redacted, of course. We found his. Same date, same hospital. The mother's names are different, but you look like a lazy god photocopied you." "What's your point?" I said. I heard the edge in my own voice and hated it. He tapped the folder. "The state thinks Zach knocked over that liquor store. The clerk was shot. Zach is a mess, Mr. Hart, but he didn't pull that trigger. The city has people who saw him, people who, frankly, are sick of being asked to identify faces of young men who look like half the block under the same hoodie. But the detective has video and attitude. If you and Zach are biologically related, if there's a twin situation here, it changes the story we can tell about misidentification, pattern, tunnel vision. It gives a jury a second option that isn't just liar." "You want me to take a DNA test?" I said. He looked at me the way a person looks at a socket before they plug something in. "I want you to look in that courtroom and tell me whether if you were 12 feet away like that clerk was on a grainy camera, you could tell the difference." "I can't," I said, and my stomach pulled again. Saying it didn't feel like betrayal, it felt like accuracy. "Then there's the other thing," Klein said. He leaned back, chair groaning, and pinched the bridge of his nose with ink-smudged fingers. "Zach says when he was 12, a social worker told him he had a twin out there who won the lottery. He didn't believe it. Or he did, and believing it felt like swallowing a battery. He wants to meet you." The room pressed in. The fluorescent hum felt louder, higher. I thought of my parents' hallway, the framed photo of baby me, the soft edges of my mother's cardigan. I thought of forms with unknown in the family history field. I thought of a drunk on 18th Street calling me Zach. "And if he's lying?" I asked. He studied my face like he could watch the answer write itself. "Then he's making an extraordinary claim that can be checked with a cheap kit from Walgreens. If he's not lying, then two boys were split, and only one of them got to grow up with a bike in the garage and a dog that slept under his crib." It shouldn't have cut as cleanly as it did. I pictured a crib. I pictured a dog that would have been the same dog because my parents are loyal that way. I pictured a second blanket folded over the rail and not used. Outside, a siren rose and fell, a car ambulancing down California Avenue. Klein waited. The room smelled like toner and tiredness. I was aware of the scrape of my jeans against the cheap chair fabric, the way my thumbnail found a rough patch of skin by my index finger and worried it. "Okay," my voice came out smaller than I liked. "I'll take the test." He nodded once like he'd been holding his breath and finally got to release it. "We'll do it clean," he said. "Chain of custody so the state doesn't sneer. I'll call the lab. If it comes back the way I think it will, we'll motion to admit. And Miles, Mr. Hart, prepare yourself for the rest of the questions the universe will decide you need to answer." I thought I had already prepared. The subpoena, the photo in County Orange, the face. But preparation is theater. The real thing is the hallway of a courthouse and the sound of a radiator you can't fix. Klein opened the door, then paused. "One more thing. Detective Gallagher is going to be very interested in you now that there are two of you. Don't talk to him without me in the room." "He already thinks I'm the guy," I said. My mouth tasted like burnt coffee at the words, "thinks I'm the guy." What's he going to think now? "That he was right twice," he said. He straightened his tie clip like a knight polishing a spoon. "How long can you stand between two versions of the same face before one of them decides to claim your life as his alibi?"
The swab was anticlimax. Klein scheduled it at a lab on the West Loop side of Ashland that smelled like disinfectant and microwaved soup. A woman in scrubs swabbed the inside of my cheek like I was a kid with a popsicle stain. She bagged it with the careful ceremony of people who know that paper becomes weapon, sealed the edges with a sticker, and signed a chain of custody form with loops in her G that made my name look pretty. "Results in 5 to 7 days, she said. I spent those days at my desk pretending spreadsheets were more complicated than a face. The new Ventra rollout had a glitch at 2 stations, and my inbox bloomed with the polite panic of middle management. I liked the emails. They were full of verbs I could do. Investigate, aggregate, report. Nothing in my personal life used verbs like that. My personal life had verbs like wonder and avoid and replay. When I left work, a man on the platform did a double take that wasn't a double take so much as a double freeze. He held his phone low like he was going to text, and took a photo. I saw my face on the black screen, pale oval, winter red nose. "Hey," I said, and smiled in a way I hoped read as, "guy who won't make this louder." "You look like somebody," he said, not apologizing. The train wailed into the station, metal on metal. I got on and found a pole. The car smelled like damp gloves and old fries. At Mariano's, a cashier looked at me and looked again. "You're on TV," she said, half a question, half a thrill. The news had run the security stills with a bad caption. The comment section had my face mixed up with anybody who has a narrow jaw and bad luck. I said, "Nope," and smiled again, because my version of fight is smile and leave. Detective Gallagher called me twice. The second time, his voice softened into something like faux uncle. "You see that kid yet? He is Zach." "I met his lawyer," I said. "He told me not to talk to you." "You're talking to me," he said, and I could hear the gum. "Not about anything that matters," I said, and hung up. The last time I had performed that particular kind of bravery was ending a relationship by text when I was 25. This felt worse. At night, I found myself checking the deadbolt twice and then a third time, like the third time was the charm for superstition. My apartment smelled like clean laundry and thawed chili. I played Springsteen low on the Bluetooth speaker because my dad had indoctrinated me, and there are worse religions than Born to Run. On the coffee table, the envelope from the court sat under a coaster like I could keep from seeing it by pretending it was a drink. I went for a run on the 606, breath frosting, running gloves squeaking at the seams. I passed a woman walking a dog that looked like a cartoon, and she shortened the leash by instinct as I came up. A small, human, not about me motion. I tried to decide if I would have done the same. Probably. The world teaches you to shorten leashes. Klein called on day 4. I answered with my heart up near my throat like it was trying to watch. "We got a preliminary match," he said. "Full report pending, but 99 point something something an identical twin would understand better than me." I sat down on my bed like the floor had tilted. The mattress huffed. "So we're monozygotic is the lab's word. Mono 1, zygote egg. You share a face because you share a map. I'll file the motion to admit. The judge can still say no to anything that sounds like soap opera instead of science. But science is loud." I thought my first feeling would be joy. It wasn't exactly. It was a tidal relief, then a grief that made my ribs ache. I pictured a baby split. I pictured a social worker with a stack of files choosing which baby got which hallway to learn. Klein cleared his throat. "Zach would like to meet you before the next court date, only if you want. It helps me if I can say you're willing to testify to your own twinness without sounding like a carnival barker." "What would we talk about?" I said. My voice sounded 12. "Faces," Klein said simply, "and the fact that your mother may be 2 names in 2 files, or 1 name read wrong with a busy pen." The jail's interview room was gray, made manifest. The light hummed, the table was bolted, the chair creaked like a cheap theater prop. When they brought him in, I had to steady my hands under the table. The cuffs bit the soft bit of skin under his thumbs. I knew that bit of skin. I'd nicked it on a can once and bled like a leaky faucet. He looked at me like he was looking at a window. His eyes were mine, and I felt the cliché break into something true. "Miles?" he asked. His voice was lower, smoked at the edges. He smelled like jail, bleach and something stale. "Yeah," I said. "Zach?" He grinned without teeth. "That's what they're calling me. Zachary Reed, and they want me to feel more already judged than usual." We stared, 2 men with the same face making it weirder by trying not to behave like a mirror. He tapped a finger on the table. I recognized the rhythm. It's my anxious drummer. Thumb, forefinger, ring, then repeat. "My guy says you didn't do it," he said. "My guy's not wrong. Your guy's at tie with legs. I don't hate him." We both smiled and then stopped because it felt like a betrayal of something we hadn't named. "Did you know?" I asked quietly. "About me? About this?" He blinked slow. "I knew there was a twin out there because a social worker with too many files and not enough caution told 12-year-old me that I had a mirror with a better life. I didn't look because looking felt like hanging a picture of a house I couldn't live in. I saw your face last month when Gallagher waved me a still. I kept my mouth shut and then I didn't." He cocked his head. "You didn't look either." "No. I had parents." He nodded like that single line carried furniture. "I had houses," he said, careful to keep scorn out of it and only let the facts through. We sat in the hum of the fluorescent and the scrape of the vent. The guard at the door cleared his throat, just enough to remind us we were in a machine that ran on minutes. "I'm sorry," I blurted, "for nothing and everything. For being adopted at 8 weeks and not 5 months. For goodnight songs sung by the same voice. For outgrowing bikes one at a time instead of watching bikes pass through houses like visitors." He shrugged with one shoulder. If we start apologizing for stuff we didn't do, we're going to die of thirst. Tell me something real instead. Tell me you sleep on your side, or you hate mushrooms, or you have a scar on your left knee that looks like a comma. I laughed, helpless. Right knee, semicolon. He grinned. Rebel. The guard said time. We stood awkwardly like we were choosing whether to hug at a wedding we'd both crashed. He raised his cuffed hands an inch and let them fall. If I get out of this, I want to try pancakes. What? I asked, startled. He shrugged, embarrassed for the first time. In movies, twins eat pancakes together. It seems like a rule. I nodded. Pancakes. My throat tightened around the idea. We'll get a stack as big as your face. Which is your face, he said, wry. Yeah, which is my face. When I left the jail, the January air hit my teeth with that metallic winter taste. I shoved my hands deeper into my pockets. My phone buzzed. Klein. Full results in. Filing now. Across the street, a man ducked his head against the wind and then looked up, scanning faces, doing the calculation all of Chicago does all the time. Friend, threat, stranger. For the first time in my life, I didn't know which category a version of me belonged in. How many truths can you hold at once before one starts spilling out of your mouth without your permission?
The twist didn't arrive on lab letterhead. It arrived as a thin packet of photocopies slid across Klein's desk, the edges warm like it had been hugged by the machine. I sent an investigator to Mercy, he said. The hospital's birth logs are a mess, because that's what happens when the state slices budgets thin and makes paper last 20 years longer than it should. But we got this. He tapped a line with a pen bitten to a ragged edge. March 14th, 1992. 2 male infants. Times 12 minutes apart. Mother listed for one, Jane Doe. Not a name, a shrug. Mother listed for the other, Juliana R., with a last name smudged by a copy that could have been Rico or Riker or Rich. Attending nurse, Holt. Attending physician, Dr. L. Beans. Jane Doe? I said, feeling stupid for repeating ink. Sometimes they write that when a mother refuses to give a name, Klein said. Sometimes they write it when the clerk doesn't ask because the nurse is yelling for a suction tube and the baby comes blue. Sometimes they write it when someone tells them to write it. My scalp tingled under my hair. What's the other twist, Walter? I asked. When I get nervous, I call people by their first names like we've known each other longer than we have, like familiarity can shore up a leaning wall. He didn't make me drag it out of him. He flipped to the next page, a newspaper clipping scanned and enlarged until the letters bled. Midwest Family Connections founder resigns amid records probe. The subhead was the kind you only write when you think it won't matter to anyone outside a 3-mile radius. Audit finds irregularities in closed adoptions, 1990-1994. My adoption agency, the one with the cheerful font. Klein blew out a breath that lifted the front of his tie. There was a state audit in 2008. It didn't get much play. They found sloppy paperwork and some sealed files where sealed became shredded. The director resigned and took a job in Arizona. No criminal charges. Families got sympathy letters instead of answers. The auditor's report is redacted to uselessness. But, he topped the log again, 2 baby boys, 12 minutes apart. 1 file marked confidential medical, 1 file with a mother's name so smudged you could argue it in court like modern art. I stared at the copy until the black dots reorganized into meaning and back into chaos. So you're telling me, what, that somebody split 2 babies and made 2 stories and put unknown in a box so the form would let them move on? I'm telling you the universe has an ugly sense of humor, and that if a jury hears identical twins, one adopted, one not, as a possible explanation for your face in the wild, it might be the first time they look at Zach and see 2 options, instead of one kind of man in one kind of hoodie. There was a knock and a head popped in, paralegal with a high ponytail and a pen between her teeth.
"Gallagher's out front," she said. "He says he wants 5 minutes and a chance to save everyone time." The way she echoed save made it sound like a threat. Klein and I exchanged a look. He shrugged. "Let him do his song," he said, and I realized then that trial lawyers all secretly think other people are auditioning. Gallagher came in with that gum-chewing posture that says everything's an inconvenience that proves his point about the world. He smelled like winter and the sugar of gas station coffee. He looked at me like he wanted to use me as a teaching aid at a school for cops. "So there are 2 of you," he said. "I'd love to say that makes this simpler." "It does," I said. "It gives you 2 chances to be wrong." He smiled like a kitten batting a shoelace. "We've got video, we've got footprints in blood on the linoleum, we've got a clerk who said narrow jaw, flint eyes before he went under anesthesia and didn't come back up. We've got Zach's prints at a pawn shop 2 blocks over, where he sold a phone a day later with the clerk's wife's text history still in the cloud." My stomach turned so fast I had to swallow carefully. "What?" Klein raised his hand. "And you contacted counsel when you realized the exculpatory evidence also included inculpatory evidence against the wrong twin?" he asked, tone filigreed with sarcasm. Gallagher rolled a shoulder, not answering. "Point is," he said to me, "if you're involved, now's the time to make a deal and let your mirror take the fall like he's been taking the fall since kindergarten." It was a dirty line. It landed. My face went hot. I stood too quickly and the chair scraped loud. "Do I look like I pawned dead people's phones?" I said, my voice higher than I wanted it. "I was home making chili." "Chili," he repeated, writing it in the air like he might file it. He turned to Klein. "Your boy's twin is trying to make a family reunion out of a murder case. I don't care if they came out of the same oven, one of them burned down a man's life. I get paid to decide which one." "You get paid to find the truth," Klein said, crisp. "Juries decide." Gallagher smiled with no teeth this time. "Juries decide what I feed them," he said. He was already turning toward the door. He paused. "Oh, and the pawn shop camera? The clerk at the pawn shop? He said the kid who sold the phone had a scar on his right knee like a comma. He looked at my legs like he could see through denim." I didn't move. Klein didn't blink. Gallagher chuckled like he had told us a joke only he enjoyed. "See you in court," he said, and left a weather pattern in the doorway. When he was gone, Klein leaned back and let his chair thrum once. "They'll try to turn your body into a map for their theory," he said. "Don't let them. Miles, I need you to think about every minute of that night. And, more important, I need you to prepare to choose what you are to Zach when the court asks you to define it." What do you call someone who has your face, your map, and your ghost, and might still be a stranger who can drown you by accident?
I didn't sleep like a person with an off switch for a while. My brain did that slideshow trick you can't control, frames clicking by, Gallagher's gum, Zach's cuffs, Klein's bitten pen, each one demanding commentary I couldn't give. I told my parents, there isn't a tidy way to do it. They sat on the sagging couch in their Oak Park living room, the one that smelled like my childhood afternoons, and the lemon oil my mother uses to fight time. I told them about the courtroom, the face, the lab result, the adoption agency clipping. My mother's hands found each other and held on, not like prayer, more like keeping count. My father had the stillness he gets when a tool slips and the fix is going to be expensive. "We didn't know," my mom said. Her voice wobbled once and then held. "Miles, we didn't. If we had known—" "I know," I said quickly, because the last thing I wanted was their guilt crashing into my guilt and making a pile-up. "I'm not asking for an apology. I'm asking if there's anything in the adoption file the agency gave you that looked strange, even if it didn't look strange at the time." My father disappeared into the basement and came up with a banker's box that smelled like basement.
dust and old paper and winter coats. He set it on the coffee table like a ceremony. We went through it together, page by page. The cheerful pamphlet with interracial families on the cover, the home study with my parents' friends writing how they'd be excellent, they were, the placement letter with dates like prayers, a bill that made my father say, "Huh," and my mother look away. "Here," I said, fingers on a carbon copy with faded blue ink. 2 weeks post-placement well check, Nurse Holt, the same name from the Mercy log. Scribbles next to my weight, my feeding schedule, a note about a possible hernia that turned out not to be one. I turned the page over and found a sticky line of glue where something used to be and was now air. "What was this?" I asked. My mother leaned close, reading glasses sliding down her nose. She shook her head. "I don't know. We didn't erase anything. Why would we?" My father lifted another sheet. It was a photocopy of a letter on state letterhead from 2008. "Dear family," it began, and then did that bureaucratic apology that says everything and nothing. "During a routine audit, some records could not be located. We regret any distress this news may cause." It suggested any questions be directed to a number that now went nowhere. "Why didn't you tell me about this?" I asked, not accusing, trying not to. "We didn't want to worry you," my mother said softly. "We were told it was paperwork, shredding by mistake, boxes mislabeled. You were in high school. We were going to, and then your grandfather got sick, and then the dog, and then life keeps telling you your timing is bad." It was like looking at a map where the roads are straight until they reach the city and then they tangle. I put the sticky-edged page back in the box with care that felt like apology. On the way home, my phone buzzed with a number that announced itself as unknown caller. I let it ring, then picked up just before it died because I am bad at letting things go unanswered. "Mr. Hart," a woman's voice said. It was low and cracked on one syllable like a record. "My name is Lita Holt." It took me a second. The nurse. The name on the page. "Yes," I said, surprised into honesty. "I shouldn't be calling," she said, "but shouldn't is a word I wore out in '92. I saw you on the news with that split screen. I told myself it wasn't my business, and then my grandson said the internet thinks you're twins, and the internet can be many things, but it was not wrong about that." I sat down on the arm of my own couch because my knees made a case for it. "Miss Holt," I said. Then, "Lita, can I meet you?" There was a small silence where I could hear her decide whether her past could be a room she walked into without falling. "There's a diner on Cermak," she said finally. "I could be there in an hour. I'll wear a red scarf so you know I'm not a ghost." The diner smelled like bacon and the kind of coffee that makes your tongue feel thin. The red scarf was knit wide and wrapped twice. Lita Holt was smaller than her name, hair white and neat, hands ravaged by time and work. Her eyes were the same sharp gray as the day in the picture her grandson must have found. "I'm not here to confess to a crime," she said before I could ask. "I'm here to say the paperwork had teeth, and I got bit like everyone else." I nodded, because if I tried to talk too quickly, I was going to say something less careful than the situation required. In '92, Mercy had more beds than births. We were understaffed and told to smile when the camera was on. There was a social worker named Beatrix, big shoulders, bigger hair, who thought her job was to close loops. She worked with Midwest family connections. A doctor, Bennis, believed in placements like they were math, not people. A woman came in, no partner, no ring, no insurance, and gave birth to 2 boys so fast I barely got my second glove on. She paused, eyes far away. They told me to put Jane Doe on the one who didn't want to sign. The other was Juliana with a name that looked like it had been carried too long and started to smear. "What happened to the boys?" I asked. My voice sounded small. I changed 2 diapers, she said, unforgiving to herself. I gave 2 bottles. I wrote heart on a band because Beatrix handed me a list and I had 1,000 other things to do, and you were going home to them 2 days later, and the list said heart was the placement. The other band got Reed. State took him after 5 months when Juliana couldn't. If there was money, I didn't see it. If there was fraud, I saw only the corner of the page. I retired in '99. The audit in 2008 sent me a letter and a questionnaire that asked me to recall which pens we used and how sticky the labels were. I cried and put it in a drawer. "Do you know Juliana's last name?" I asked. She closed her eyes, scrubbed her face like she might wake memory like a cold engine. "Rico," she said eventually, uncertain, or Riker, or Rivarez. It had an R and 2 I's. She had the softest voice I ever heard in that ward. She sang to one baby while I held the other, and she tried to split her voice into 2 throats. It broke me then and breaks me now. I wanted to put my hand over hers and felt like doing it would be a performance. Instead, I said, "Thank you." She nodded. "Find the truth," she said, "and tell it like you weren't the hero of it." When I stood to leave, she touched my sleeve. Her fingers were cold. "One more thing," she said. "A week after those boys were born, a woman came to the desk to ask for a file with a code I didn't recognize. She was rehearsed. She said she'd come for corrections. She had a scarf the color of motor oil and a perfume that made my eyes water. I asked for an ID. She walked away. I found out later she was a private investigator hired by couples who paid more than they should to get babies faster than they should. I can't prove that, but I can't unsmell that perfume." It clung to me after I left the diner. Bacon, coffee, motor oil. The city apologized for January by making the sky blue for an hour. I stood on the sidewalk and felt like the air had too many answers in it. Klein called me that afternoon to say the judge would hear his motion to admit the DNA next week. "Get ready," he said. "They'll try to make you the bad mirror." That night, someone slid an envelope under my apartment door. Inside, a photo of me getting off the Blue Line at Damon, grainy but clear enough to circle my face with a red marker. "Watch yourself," the note said in block letters. I called Klein. I called Nate, whose first instinct was to come sit on my couch with deli sandwiches. I didn't call my parents. I didn't want my mother sitting in the dark imagining red marker circles around my head. I checked the deadbolt 3 times. I slept with the lamp on. The bulb hummed like a small, patient thing. What do you do when your life starts leaving you notes in your own handwriting?
You don't get to choose much in a story like this. The detective chooses to call. The lawyer chooses to file. The judge chooses to hear. The past chooses to remain a fog, with anecdotes for streetlights. But you do get to choose your own verbs. I made 2 decisions. First, I would testify. Not because Zach needed me, he did, but because the truth needed a voice that didn't sound like strategy. I would say twin out loud to a courtroom, with my father's steadiness and my mother's teacher voice. I would say adoption agency and audit and 2 boys in 1 hour, and trust that facts might outstare a theory for once. Second, I would find Juliana if she was findable. I would ask her the questions a son doesn't usually get to ask without a lifetime of context. Did you want me? Did you want us? Did you sing to 2 throats? Did you make a choice or have one made for you by people who liked forms more than faces? I took the week off work. I told my boss the truth stripped for parts. Family thing, court thing, identity thing. He said, "Take the time, like a man who knows clocks better than feelings." I called a PI I found in a forum for adoptees who used words like search angel without irony. Her name was Mara. She had the patient tone of a person who can sit in the back row of a funeral and not make it about her. "I'll try," she said.
E Ku R E Quer R E Rivas, Mercy in 92. There could be a grandmother, a cousin, a neighbor who remembers a girl who cried while she packed a bag. She took my money gently, like money is sad and shouldn't be handled roughly. I also bought 2 phones and a door camera, because verbs are good, but locks are better. I gave Nate one of the phones. If I text you a word we pick, you call 911 and my mother, I said. What word? I said comma, and we both smiled, and then neither of us did. When Klein asked if I wanted to meet Zach again before the hearing, I said yes. This time I brought pancakes. The guard made me leave them outside, like I had tried to smuggle in a lake. We ate pancakes cold from styrofoam at a metal cable that caught every clink. Pancakes aren't as good like this, Zach said, chewing. But they're still pancakes. I found the nurse. Halt. He sat up straighter. She remember anything that makes this a movie? She remembers perfume that made her eyes water. She remembers a woman asking for corrections. She remembers 2 boys. He tapped the anxious drummer rhythm faster. We're in the part where it could go either way. Either the judge laughs and says your soap opera is hearsay, or the judge lets your face in as evidence. I'm choosing to believe in my verbs, I said. And he laughed like I told a decent joke. When I left, the winter air grabbed my ears and squeezed. I looked up at a sky the color of old teeth. I thought about 2 babies and a nurse trying to do her job while forms asked for simplicity. I chose again. I would not turn this into a neat story with a hero. I would hold the mess like a map folded wrong. What do you call a choice that feels less like a fork and more like a promise to keep walking even if the streetlights go out?
Mara found Juliana on a Wednesday that tried to be spring and failed. "It's Rivas," she said, efficient joy in her voice. "Juliana Rivas. She's in Berwyn. She works at a daycare. Her Facebook is Cats and Birthday Cakes. She kept her last name." I sat in my car outside the daycare, hands on the steering wheel, while the line of toddlers in puffy coats waddled past the window like hope on legs. The building smelled like crayons and disinfectant and crackers. When Juliana came to the front desk, I knew her before she said her name. The eyes did it. Not color, shape. A way the lids folded that I had seen in a mirror my whole life without noticing. "Hi," I said, and my voice did the thing where it has to remind itself what a voice is for. "My name is Miles. I was born at Mercy in 92. "The nurse?" she asked, like she'd been rehearsing other possibilities. "Did she call you?" I said she called me, and we did a test. She looked at my face like she was choosing which memory it fit into. Tears came without ceremony. She brushed them away like irritations. "Come after nap. The kids need quiet now. I can't give you mine yet." After nap, the daycare smelled like bleach and apple juice. We sat in a corner with construction paper fish on the wall. "I was 19, she said. "My mother said we could do this the shameful way, family secrecy, blessed are the forgetful. Or we could do this the modern way, a closed adoption with a nice couple and a priest to say it was all fine. I wanted to keep you both," her mouth folded around both like she was trying to chew a bone. "Your father was not a picture I wanted in a frame. I thought I could make math out of something that was not math." "What happened?" I asked. The question felt like a theft, but she offered me the bag anyway. "I had no money," she said. "The social worker said the agency could help, that there was a couple who had been waiting. They said 2 babies or a lot, that maybe it was kinder to give one boy a start without the others wait. I hate those words now. Kinder, wait. They are words rich people use to explain to poor people what mercy looks like. I signed a thing, if I remember right, but I don't remember right. I had a fever. I bled. The nurse was kind. She had short hair and hands that smelled of soap. They brought your brother back and then took him again when I had the fever, and when I asked, the social worker said the agency had placed him. I said, "How do you place a baby like a couch?" She said, "Watch your tone." I went home with one and went home without one. The one I kept, the state kept instead at 5 months when I missed an appointment and the social worker wrote non-compliant on a form. The word non-compliant burned. "Zach," I whispered. She nodded, covering her mouth. "I looked for him when I was 23, and again when I was 29. They told me the file was sealed, then audit, then a phone number that didn't answer. I made a Facebook once, where I posted half a face, thinking maybe you'd see it and think it looked like yours. It was foolish. I deleted it when a man sent me messages that made me think about moving states." I wanted to hold her hand. I didn't. I wanted to say I forgave her. I couldn't. Not because I blamed her, but because forgiveness felt like overreach for a person who had just learned a language and wanted to conjugate every verb at once. "Will you," I began and stopped. "Would you be willing to come to court, to say what you said here, to be the person who says 2 boys to a room that thinks in singular?" She swallowed, like the air had gotten thick. "If they let me," she said, "if they don't call me names." "They might," I said, honestly. "They might say non-compliant again with fancier suits." I took a breath. "I will be sitting there, and you have my eyes." She laughed, wet. "You do," she said. The second twist came later that night when a brick came through my kitchen window with a note rubber-banded to it. Glass went everywhere. The brick smelled like basement. The note said, "If he walks, you fall," in block letters done by a person who presses too hard. I called 911. I called Klein. I sent Nate a photo of the brick and the word comma, and then false alarm because we had rules. The officers were polite and bored, and took photos of the broken glass like tourists. "You got enemies?" one asked. I said, "Only in rooms with wooden benches." He laughed like he had to. I picked glass out of my sink with fingers careful as tweezers, and thought about Gallagher's smile and the pawn shop footage and the comma scar. I thought about Juliana saying both like a bone, and the nurse saying perfume like a ghost. An email popped up on my phone from a sender I didn't recognize, Beatrix.h, a domain that looked like somebody's vanity project. "We should talk," it said. "If the state asks me questions, I would like not to do my remembering alone. Same diner, noon. Don't bring your lawyer unless you want him to watch us cry." Beatrix, the social worker with big hair, the woman who wrote heart on a band while a nurse washed a baby. I didn't bring Klein, not because I didn't want to witness, but because some rooms need fewer ties. Beatrix looked exactly like the kind of woman who decides her problems can be solved by stationery, a folder, tabs, a pen that makes satisfying clicks. She smelled like powder and a perfume that made my eyes water. "You took 2 babies and made 2 stories," I said, my voice shaking anyway. "Don't say it like that," she said. "Say the system took what it takes and leaves women with empty-faced ghost faces." "What do you want, Beatrix?" I asked. "Absolution?" She shook her head. "Nothing so Catholic," she said. "I want to say I kept notes I shouldn't have kept in a file I shouldn't have kept with a key I shouldn't have had." She slid the folder toward me. Inside, copies of intake forms, a photocopy of a driver's license from a Juliana who looked too young and too proud to be forgiven for anything, a letter with a number that had been scratched out and written again. Dr. Bennis believed in placements because his friend ran an agency that paid him referral fees under the table. I believed in placement because I hated seeing women leave with empty arms and tongue-bitten apologies. I wrote heart on a band because a woman with a checkbook was waiting and a nurse with soap smelled scared and I had paperwork to finish before 5 o'clock. I wrote read on the other because a caseworker wrote non-compliant and the state likes that word more than any other. Did you know they were identical? She nodded once, eyes flinching like she'd swallowed hot tea. You screamed the same scream. It goes through the bone. She took a napkin and wiped her eyes with a fury I liked. If I testify, they will say disgraced, irregularities, and no charges filed, and they will say you're just trying to erase your guilt with a story. I will say 2 boys and let the room decide. We sat in the smell of bacon and powder and motor oil perfume, and I felt like all my verbs had been used up for the day. What do you do when a door you thought was locked opens into a hallway full of other doors you have to choose in the worst lighting imaginable?
Court again. Different day. Same radiator, banging like metal thunder somewhere it can't be fixed. The judge allowed the DNA over the state's objections, admitted the hospital log with an eye roll for the smudged names, permitted testimony limited to identity from Juliana, the nurse, and Beatrix, with the caveat he could strike anything that smelled like melodrama. I sat on the bench and watched the room assemble itself into rolls. The assistant state's attorney had the brisk energy of a person who runs for fun. Gallagher anchored the second row, jaw set like he'd been chewing a nail. Clyme whispered with Zach, who looked like a man in a mirror who hadn't slept. Juliana sat behind me. I could feel her breathing like a second metronome. Lita Holt, small and exact in her red scarf, took a seat that gave her a clear line of sight to the witness stand. Beatrix came in late, folder hugged like a life vest. Klein called me first. He asked my name, my age, my job. He asked me if I saw myself at the defense table. He asked me to say twin out loud. I did. The word echoed in my mouth like a coin dropped into a glass. He put the lab report on the screen and walked the jury through the numbers, the 99 point, lots of nines, the monos, the science. He had a whiteboard with circles and arrows. I watched the jurors try to pretend they understood because their job required it. Then the state got their turn. The assistant state's attorney smiled at me with the kind of smile people save for funerals. "Mr. Hart," she said, "did you ever sell a phone to a pawn shop on 63rd? "No," I said. "Do you have a scar on your right knee?" she asked. I felt the courtroom lean toward my legs like a living thing. "I do," I said. She didn't smile. "Did you know your twin has one too?" "I do now," I said. "So if a witness saw a scar, it would narrow it much, would it?" "It would narrow it to 2, which is the entire point of being here." She let herself smile at that. It wasn't friendly. "Do you love your brother?" "I don't know him," I said. My voice was steady. "I want to." "Do you want him to go to prison?" "I want the truth. If he did this, I will bring him pancakes in jail. If he didn't, I want him to eat pancakes in the open air." She moved on, but I saw a juror with a buzz cut scratch his chin the way people do when a metaphor gets through their defenses and sits down. Juliana testified like she was walking across a frozen lake, careful, eyes forward, gathering herself when the ice groaned. The assistant state's attorney objected 3 times to the word took. The judge sustained twice. He let placed sit. The jury heard both and looked at me, both of me. Lita Holt told the room that 2 boys cried the same way, and a nurse did what she could while the forms asked for a simplicity they didn't deserve. Beatrix spoke like a woman who has written the word sorry too many times on birthday cards. The state made her say resigned. She said it like she was spitting a pit. Then came the pawn shop footage, the clerk on the stand, the description of a comma scar and a hoodie.
Then came a doorbell camera from an apartment 2 blocks away that caught a man's profile at 9:43 p.m., a face turned just enough to let the jury's panic fill in the missing pixels. And then came the part I didn't expect. Klein called a cop, not Gallagher, a patrol officer from a different district who had been the first on scene at the liquor store. He testified to an evidence bag logged at 10:14 p.m., a partial print on the counter, a smudge on the backroom door, and a shoe print in blood with a tread pattern not like Zach's shoes as booked, but like a pair standard issued to, Klein paused here, a small theater, security guards at a warehouse 2 doors down. The ASA objected. The judge overruled. Klein produced a receipt, a body cam still from a different night, 3 nights before the robbery, of Gallagher talking to the security supervisor behind the liquor store, the 2 of them standing close, gestures big, a joke face on Gallagher. Not proof of anything, proof of proximity. Klein didn't go where TV would go. He didn't call anyone corrupt. He let the jury put the receipt in their pocket. He asked the patrol officer what he saw. The officer said, chaos, and a set of prints we didn't match to anyone because we were told to look at the kid with the face. The noise in the room after that sentence wasn't noise exactly. It was a collective adjustment of posture. In closing, Klein didn't do fireworks. He did pancakes. When you have 2 men with the same face and the state can't be bothered to figure out which one it wants, that's reasonable doubt. When a nurse and a mother and a paper trail tell you a story that should have been told gently and instead got told by systems with rubber stamps, that's context for how a face gets mistaken. You don't have to like Zach. He doesn't require that. He requires that you respect the burden the state has to carry and has not carried here. The ASA told the jury not to be fooled by soap opera. She said, look at the video, like it was a talisman. She said, look at the pawn slip. She said, look at the scar. She did not say, look at the shoe print we never followed. The jury went out. I could hear Lita's scarf rasp when she took a breath. Juliana stared at her hands like they were a test she might fail. Zach looked at the table as if it had answers. I counted radiator bangs. 12. 13. The hallway smelled of stress. When they came back, the foreman looked nobody when he said, not guilty. The room did that hush again, but it was a different hush, the kind where a weight leaves and your body waits to see if it will come back. Zach's shoulders dropped. His head tipped forward and he made the quietest sound. Klein put a hand on his arm. Gallagher looked at me like he'd been told a joke he didn't get. The ASA stared at her notes, fierce in her professionalism. Zach turned to me with the smallest smile. It wasn't triumph. It was a pilot-like catching and refusing to go out. What do you call the moment when the universe hands you back a version of your life you didn't know you'd been missing, and how you hold it without crushing it?
They cut the cuffs. The chain hissed like a snake. We met not in the hallway with the cameras and the quotes, but at a diner that smelled like maple and butter and snow melting off boots. The pancakes there are as big as plates, circus rounds with a crisp edge. We ordered 2 stacks and didn't talk for a minute because syrup requires reverence. This is better than jail pancakes, Zach said solemnly. Low bar, I said. We laughed, soft. The laughter felt like unwrapping something you were afraid to touch. Juliana came and sat with us later. She didn't cry. She touched our hair like a woman confirming a theory. You need haircuts, she said, and we let her scold us, because scolding is love's casual cousin. We made rules. We would go slow. We would not turn this into a TV montage where twins find all the same quirks and call it destiny. We would not pretend Zach's years didn't happen, or mine didn't. We would buy an address book like it's 1999 and write down only 3 numbers under family, and mean it. We would meet Lita in the park with a thermos and tell her about pancakes.
I told my parents. My mother cried and then laughed and then cried again and then baked, which is how she metabolizes any weather. My father bought a second bike from a garage sale and set about making it a machine he could hand to a son at 33 or 15. "You're both gonna need this," he said, handing me a wrench like a blessing. Mara came by my apartment with a folder of things that would make a lawyer sweat. Copies of copies, printouts of public records, a list of names with lines through them. "You can sue the agency if you want," she said. "It takes time. It takes breath. It sometimes takes more than it gives back." I looked at the brick-patched window, the new glass bright and quiet. "Maybe later," I said. "Right now, I want verbs that aren't lawsuits." Zach found a job moving boxes in a warehouse where nobody knew how to spell monozygotic, and nobody cared. He came over on Sundays to watch terrible football and let my dad teach him how to true a wheel. He didn't move into my freestanding fantasy of a life with matching apartment keys. He got a room in a place that smelled like new paint and possibility. He texted me photos of dinner attempts with captions like, "Chef, cry for help." Juliana came to my parents' house on Thursdays with apples and stories about toddlers who bite and then feel bad. We learned how to sit together without making big plans. We learned the small facts. Zach hates mushrooms, but will eat them on pizza if he's drunk. My right knee aches when it's going to rain. Juliana hums when she reads. These are not plot points. They are bricks in a house. When I lie in bed now and listen to the radiator bang, I don't think court first. I think heat. When I check the deadbolt twice, I don't feel ridiculous. I feel like a man who learned a lock is a verb and not an ornament. I see Gallagher sometimes on the street. We nod the nod men do when they are trying to be decent and don't have a script. I don't hate him. Hate takes time I don't want to spend. I think he will do better next time. I let myself believe that, even if it makes me a fool. What do you build when the story you thought was one drawer turns out to be a whole cabinet? And who gets a key?
I used to think identity was a line you write once on a form and then keep tracing until the pen goes through the paper. It turns out it's a stack of lines, and some of them are lies people told because their shift was ending, and some of them are prayers you whisper into a ceiling, and some of them are pancakes. I am Miles Hart. I am a son twice, in different tenses. I am a brother new as a penny and old as an echo. I am a man who looks like a man who didn't shoot a clerk and was almost the man who did because a camera thought all narrow jaws were the same. I am two photos, side by side, with differences only people who love us will notice. A freckle, a habit, the way one of us looks at the floor before he laughs. There is a part of me that wants to make it neat. Evil agency, saintly nurse, brave mother, redeemed brother, wise detective. None of that is true. People are messier than you want them to be when you're tired. Systems love simple stories because simple stories are cheaper. The truth costs. When I fill out forms now, I still write unknown under family history. The box doesn't have a check for found or found enough. I write unknown and them think known to me. And then I go home and make coffee that tastes like smoke and text my brother to see if he wants pancakes. If a life was a map, I have two sets of directions. I will get lost sometimes. I am learning to enjoy how the city looks from the wrong street.
Tonight, we ate pancakes until the syrup ran out and we didn't. When we paid the check, the waitress looked at our faces and said, "Twins?" And we said yes, like we'd been practicing our whole lives.